Hello my friends, Hank here, and today we're going to check out a simple, beginner-friendly technique that every scale modeler should learn how to do at some point. We're going to learn how to scratch build tarp and canvas covers for our model kits. Now, I'll be demonstrating today by making a soft cap for this Tamiya 1/35 scale GMC CCKW 2.5 ton truck, but these techniques will work for any tarp or cover structure you're trying to build. We're only going to need a few materials to do this. First, we're going to grab a bit of tissue paper and start to rough out the shapes that we'll need to cut for our cover. This is just regular old tissue paper that you'd use to pack a gift, and it doesn't matter what color you've got on hand because we're going to paint this up a little bit later in the process. The first thing we want to do is eyeball and measure out roughly how big we want our main cover to be. If we look at reference images of CCKWs, you can see that the soft top cover comes down maybe 4 to 6 inches on the sideboards of the bed, so we'll make a mark right about there. We can also notice that the front and rear sections of the cover also extend a bit over the ends, so we'll just adjust for that accordingly as well. Once we've got our shape roughed out, we can go ahead and cut that piece out of our tissue paper and do a little test fit. A lot of times on these trucks, you'd also see flaps covering the front and rear of the bed, so we'll eyeball how big those should be and cut 2 additional pieces out to fit there as well. Once we have all of our pieces prepared, we're going to start to mount them in place. The secret to this technique is the glue that holds it all together. Literally. All you gotta do is take a bit of regular white PVA glue, like Elmer's classroom glue, and dilute it down with some tap water. You don't need to be precise with the ratio, just goop some glue into a container and cut it down with a healthy amount of water. Starting with one of our front and rear covers, let's dip one of them into the PVA glue mixture and carefully pull it out, being really careful not to accidentally rip it while it's wet. And then we can line the piece up where we want it and gently fold it into position. Don't worry about the inside folds of these front and back pieces being too clean, as they're going to be covered up completely by the main section of our cover. We'll then repeat the same process with the rear flap. And then finally, we'll place our main cover into place across the support rails, being careful to try and keep the sides even on each side of the vehicle. And for a final touch, we can add a little smaller flap on the rear of our truck bed. If you look at the reference photos, you can see that these front and rear flaps often had a smaller ventilation window. We can replicate that with another small little piece of tissue paper. Lovely. Once our canvas cover is on there and we're happy with how it looks, we can just walk away and let the whole thing dry completely. Alright, a few hours later, our tarp is dried and solidified into position. It's still tissue paper, so it's fragile, of course, but it'll be strong enough for us to paint and weather up now. Before moving on to painting, we can add a few extra little details if we want. Looking at reference photos again, you can see that these covers are secured with simple tie-down ropes. We can replicate those by poking little eyelets into our cover with a needle and running small strands of thread through each hole to create our tie-downs. These can be fastened into place with a little dot of super glue to help them stay put. And if we go around and add these all around our cover, they add a nice extra bit of detail and realism to our build. At this stage, we can finally move on to painting. Nice and simple here today, we'll just brush paint this whole thing up using some khaki. Now, worth noting, I had already built and painted up this truck, but if you're planning on adding tarps from the beginning of your project, do that whole process before you do any of this painting at all. These tarps and covers can be airbrushed just like the rest of the kit, and that can save some time with all this surface area that needs to be brushed in. Okay, looking pretty good so far. Now that we've got our cover painted up, let's go ahead and spray this with a coat of gloss varnish to prepare for a touch of weathering. Once our varnish dries, we're just going to do a simple sludge wash of enamel dark dirt all over our cover. This looks super messy at first, but stick with me. Trust the process. Once we've got some of our wash on there, we can thin it down with some enamel thinner or mineral spirit to help it flow all over the surface of our cover. And then, using a bit of paper towel, we can start to wipe off a bit of the excess product and help create a bit of streaking grime. Be sure to wipe in the direction of gravity here, top to bottom, and rolling across the surface of our cover. Once we're happy with how the cover is looking, we can walk away for a bit and let that dry completely. And for our final step, we can spray our cover with a coat of matte varnish to seal in and protect all of our work and knock down some of that excess shininess. And simple as that, we've got ourselves a nice canvas cover for our CCKW truck. This is a great little technique that has a million different applications for your model work, and it can really help add that extra bit of detail or unique flair to an otherwise out-of-the-box build. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed. If you'd like to check out some more beginner-friendly techniques and tricks, I'll link to a few of my other tutorials right here. And until next time, my friends, be well, happy building, cheers.